All right, and good morning and welcome to the Rapid Rehousing Training for Rhode Island HMIS in Clarity. Oops, okay, sorry. As a reminder, if everyone could please mute their computers unless they are asking a question during the question and answer period, that would be helpful. Also, if you have logged in using your unique link from Zoom, you do not need to put your name and organization in the chat because we can take attendance through Zoom. But if you're joining someone else, if you're in an office and you're sharing the login, please make sure that your name and organization are in the chat so we can take your attendance. And it looks like Melissa Liberty and Madeline Sylvia have follow the rules because they are sharing the link and they both put their names in the chat so they can get credit. Thank you guys. All right, so this is what we're going to work on today. We have an hour, and for those of you who are staying on for the permanent supportive housing, or not staying on, but going to the next session that is immediately following this for permanent supportive housing, there are a lot of similarities, as you would imagine, but we did want to make sure to have two separate trainings because there are a few differences between the enrollment process and services for rapid rehousing versus permanent supportive housing. So some of these slides may be similar if you're going to attend the next training. But we are going to do a training refresher. We're going to talk about creating an enrollment in rapid rehousing enrollment, rather. We're going to talk about the housing move-in date, our favorite thing. We're going to talk about providing services, and lastly, exit. So for the training refresher, and again, I apologize if, we've been showing these slides at the beginning of every training because we realized how important it was. And we did hear, actually, Adam reminded us yesterday how important it's going to be that users are actually entering notes and files in the correct place. So we're going to keep going over this until everybody gets it. But here is the screen that you are going to arrive on when you first log in to our Clarity instance. It's the search screen. Over here, you'll have your initials. If you were to click on those initials, it'll bring you to your account settings. Over here, we'll list your name and the agency for which you're entering data. Most people will only have one agency, but if you're related to coordinated entry or have any other special circumstance, you may have to toggle back and forth between agencies. But again, that will be very limited. Right here, this envelope is our inbox messaging and, our Clarity inbox and messaging. Right here is our Launchpad. If you were to click it, features that are available to you through your user access level will show on the next, I believe on the next slide. And then right here is your report queue. So we had our reports training yesterday and learned that when you run a report, after it's completed and ready for you to view, it will pop up here. The number of reports you run is the number that will be in this red box when they're completed. A red circle, I should say. All right, here is the more of your home page. So this is where you enter to search for a client. It is best practice that you conduct an exhaustive search before you add a new client so you do not add duplicates. So you should search by the first few letters of a first name, last name, any alias, birth date, social, whatever you have to try to identify if they're already in the system. Right here will show your last 5 searches. And then over here is where you'll actually be able to click. And if you have clients enrolled on your caseload, you'll be able to see your caseload. Okay, so this top level here, once you search a client and you click on that client, this is what will pop up here. So the client's name will be here on the left. You'll still be able to see all of these features will be on your screen as well. But this level is what we're calling the client level or the client tab. So you'll be able to see the client's profile, which contains all the demographics. Also, we've been reporting to everyone on the client profile. We've been able to change the format to add the alias. That's where you'll be able to see the client service point ID number. So you'll, not only does the client have a unique ID in Clarity, but you will also be able to see their former ID number, the ID number that was in our Clarity instance. It will be located on the profile. The history, this is all of the history, not just for one specific program, but across the whole continuum. Any program enrollments that are within our HMIS, you'll be able to see here. Programs here, so this will, if you click here, you'll see programs the clients enrolled in, recent programs that they were enrolled in, and then there's also, once you scroll down, a listing of all the available programs. And that's how you create enrollment, is by scrolling down to available programs and clicking on enrollment. Right here is the Notes tab. So this is where public notes and public alerts live. So this is where you would create a public alert. We talked quite a bit about it yesterday, but it's also where you will create notes that anyone in our entire HMIS can see. So if you are someone who is writing case notes in HMIS, you want to be sure before you enter a case note that you are on the right level. So this is the client level. This is really just basic information that anyone would need to know. So if you have a client who is, I don't know, a client who is fearful of people wearing masks, and if you approach the person wearing a mask, they're going to have some sort of a reaction, you would want to put that note in the client level so anyone who's working with the client would know that, versus other information that's really specific to the client. You want to add that in the program note, which we'll talk about in a minute. This is shared or uploaded files right here, but again, most of your files you'll be able to attach at the program level for privacy. Right here is the contact information and location. Okay, so as we said earlier, once you click on programs and create an enrollment, then you get here. This is the program level tab. You will be able to create an enrollment here. You'll be able to see program history related to that enrollment. That would be all the services offered, or provided, I should say, here. This right here, if you click this, this is how you actually provide a service and create that record of the service, as well as the notes related to the service. And then assessments, notes, and files. All of these, again, are on the program level. So they're related to whatever program you've enrolled the client in.
Thanks, Jen. So from that red box, if you could just go back one, I'm sorry. I just want to have that visual. So now you're in the programs tab. You're in that enrollment tab within the program. So if you see that the image is cut off in the next slide, this is what the rest of that visual looks like. So this is that first arrow is going to show you all the programs available within that program, within your agency. So unlike before, where you'd have to read the title of the program, you'd either see an X or an ended, the date that program was ended. Now in Clarity, you won't be able to see any inactive programs. All you'll be able to see are the active programs at your agency. And those are the programs that you'll be able to enroll all your clients into. So that second arrow, if you click that little, that actually expands the program view, and you'll be able to see the description and the availability of that program. And then that third arrow is your group, when all the family members that are associated with the current client profile that you're in. So if you're entering a family, you want to make sure that you toggle on the rest of the family members to be also included within that program entry. So when you click enroll, which is the box at the bottom, that next slide will show you the enrollment screen for your rapid rehousing program. So just like you've done before, you want to enter in your start date for the accurate date that you're entering your client. We'll go over housing moving date later on in the training, but that is going to be covered. And just friendly reminder that a client in a rapid rehousing program must have a literal homeless answer when answering the prior living situation. If they are in a housed situation, they shouldn't be entered in this rapid rehousing program. They should be in a homeless prevention project. I don't know if there's any questions on that. I know we haven't really stopped. There's nothing in the chat that I can see, but if you have a question, you guys can unmute yourselves as well. No, I think we're good. So if we go to the next slide, it's just continuing the enrollment information. You want to make sure that you answer all of your questions, not just for the head of household, for the client that you're in, but also for every single household member. And again, it's all the same questions that you guys are familiar with. One of the things that is pretty neat about this is that there's also conditional formatting. So depending if how you answer a previous question, questions after it might either change or disappear. So I think that's great. Jen, I think this one's yours.
Okay, so excuse me, as you're completing the enrollment, this is the same for any of the COC or HUD enrollments here. The disabling conditions and barriers, the way to toggle them to a different answer would be to click here on this little down arrow. This box will pop up and you'll have the ability to select no, yes, client doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected. Again, like we've been saying all along, these are all the same questions that we had in Service Point. It just looks different, and it's much easier. So the next slide here is related to monthly income and sources. So rather than the down arrow, you actually have these little toggle buttons here. So if you answer yes to income from any source, then all of these will drop down, and you'll have the option to toggle on these. And any of these are applicable. If you do toggle these on, then this amount line will come up for income. If you answer no, none of these will pop up. If you answer yes and do not toggle any of these on, you will get the error message. So it will not allow you to actually say yes to income and leave all of the income fields toggled off. You also have, and it's not, there's no slide, below this, you will also have a non-cash benefit area where if you say yes, you will have the opportunity to toggle on the non-cash benefits. None of them will, if you toggle them on for the non-cash benefits and insurance, you will not have an additional field to enter into. So after monthly income, you'll have non-cash income and then health insurance. And you'll simply toggle on whatever is applicable in those two sections. Sorry. Okay. For group enrollment, this is a really great feature. Once you've completed the enrollment for the head of household, all of the people in the household that you associated with the enrollment, back to the slide that Maria was pointing out to make sure to toggle on any group members or household members that were included. As soon as you click save for the head of households enrollment, the next household members enrollment will pop up so that you complete all of those fields. Once you click save, the next head of the next household member rather enrollment will pop up until you've completed the entry assessment or enrollment information for every household member. So it's a really great feature. Okay, housing move-in date. So the housing move-in date is the sole element that determines if a client in a rapid rehousing project is housed. The move-in date must be recorded in the project entry screen or project enrollment screen If the client spends time in housing search, you do need to go back and update the move-in date. So let me scroll back, not to make you dizzy. When you click for the first time to enroll a client, if they are not housed and they're in your rapid rehousing program, but they're conducting a housing search, you will be leaving this element empty. You'll leave it blank. When they are housed, meaning they have a lease that's signed, they have keys, and they are physically able to sleep in that unit. Not you sign a lease and in a week the unit will be ready. When they physically can lay their head down in their apartment that they have a fully executed lease and keys for, that's their move-in date. So you're gonna, if someone's in a housing search, you will not enter any information into this field. And then when someone does have a housing move-in date, you would go back, you would use the history to click on the enrollment into the rapid rehousing program that would be active. Then you would toggle or scroll down on the enrollment here to the move-in date, use the calendar to enter in the date for the move-in. So before we move on, I just want to make sure if anyone had any questions about the move-in date, because that's the most important part of this enrollment.
The other point, Jen, is that the housing move-in date has to take place during the program enrollment. So if you have an ESG rapid rehousing program and it only pays for the security deposit and the client moves in after you dismiss them from the program, you cannot put a housing move-in date because they were not housed during their participation in the program.
Thanks, Tucker. And I think along the same lines, your move-in date must be on or after their start date in your program. So if someone started your program on September 1st, you can't put in a move-in date of August 31st. And the same goes for the exit. If someone exited your program on September 1st, you cannot put in a move-in date of September 2nd. Okay. There's a question in the chat from Maya. Will the enrollment date roll over from intake or CES to other programs, or will you have to input the data once you open them to your program? So Maya, are you referring to the move-in date?
Or are you asking about the overall data cascading over?
Overall data.
Ah, yes. It will, actually. I was working in the training site yesterday. It will. There are some elements. So if you complete an enrollment in CES, in a CES enrollment, and you complete all the data elements, and then the next day you complete an entry into a rapid rehousing program, the elements, many of the elements will be there. There are a couple that you're required to complete for each unique enrollment, but much of the data will cascade. The move-in date, I do not believe is one of the elements that will cascade.
Right, right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the move-in date only appears on housing programs. So if somebody, so it would only cascade, so it won't cascade from a non-housing program into the housing program. The other thing is that the cascading is time limited in Clarity. So if somebody was in shelter for 9 months and hadn't had a CES open during that time and was in shelter for that time, you'll have to enter it new because it's been too long since there's been an entry to cascade that data over into the new program.
John Bernardo saying for best practice, should a case manager wait until they are certain that a client is moving in on that date, day of or immediately after? Yes, I would wait. The move-in date should indicate that the client has a fully executed lease and keys and that they are physically able to move in. Now we know that there are a host of reasons why someone might not move in the day they sign their lease or get their keys. But if they're physically able to sleep in that unit, then you could put the move-in date. Okay. Any other questions related to the rapid rehousing enrollment or the move-in date before we move on?
Hi, this is Caitlin from Foster Forward. I had a quick question. So we've had some clients who move into their apartments and then maybe a couple of months later have a baby. And I wanted to clarify what the enrollment process should look like for that child when you're adding them to the household after the household already has the move-in date and everything like that.
Caitlin, that's a great question. In Clarity, it is so much easier to add a household member to an enrollment. So what you would do is you would go into Clarity to the first screen where the client searches, and if it's a baby, most likely you don't have to search to see if they're in the system, but for best practice you should. And then you would add a client. Then you would navigate yourself to the head of household, add the client, complete all of the client profile elements. Then you would navigate to the head of household. So you would search for the head of household, you would search for their program history, and you would open by using the little pencil edit icon, you would edit the enrollment. And at that point, you would add the household member, add a group member. Can you add the household member before you even go into the program, Tucker? I think I don't know that. Let's take a look.
So I think you do have to add the client and add them to add the child and add them to the household first, and then they would show up as being able to add to the group.
As I was saying that, I was like, wait, there's no one in the household to associate. So once you've added the baby or whoever's added to the household, you go to the head of household profile. Over here, you manage household members, and that's where you could search for a member. So I'm just going to add, I don't know if it's even possible. I know there's, trying to see if there's someone else I can add. So I could use this client test. So Testy Tester's my head of household. I clicked over here on household members to manage. This screen popped up. I searched for the member. So if this was the baby, which it's not, but if this was a household member being added, you could click this person to add them as a child, and the start date into the household would be today, or you would update that to be whatever day they added to the household, and click save. So now we have Testy Testers, the head of household, the client test is the child. So now we've formed the household. So now we're going to go to Testy Testers program. And let me put them in the head of household, the rapid rehousing household. So now sorry.
So now under that program group members over on the right-hand side, that's where you add the other members of the new members of the household. And so you would just check that off, and then you can enroll that other household member, that new household member in there. And it doesn't have to be on the same date. So Alex is asking a related question about adding and removing household members from the enrollment. So it can be on different dates. So if the child was born later, you would want the project start to be the birthday of the child. And you can dismiss or add people in and out of the group enrollment.
I'm just going to enroll this child so we can show how to take them out. So we created the household, well, we added the child to the household, we went to the program enrollment, and we added that group member. So if we were to go back here, see, it shows that the child is active in the group, in the household. So if we wanted to exit this child from the household, so in the instance that I think Alex is related to, you would click on that household member. Sorry, I'm not finding the
Exits over to the right.
You'll click right here. It's small, sorry. I have so many screens open, I'm sorry. You're gonna click here to exit that member, and then all of the household members will pop up. You're toggling on to exit this one person from the household. If you were completing an exit for the whole household, you would toggle them both on. But you, in this instance where we're just exiting one household member, once you click exit, you'll only toggle on that one person and click end program, and then the exit assessment will show up. So we are going to talk about exit assessments a bit later, but that would be how to manage entering and exiting. We can see Alex. Yes, it was a pain to add a baby or another household member in Service Point. Agreed. Yes, this is so much easier. And I think as we once we're live in Clarity, I think we'll continue to have some household management little mini trainings that we record and upload to the LMS, because I do think for folks that aren't on this particular training, they'll still have those questions. So we'll continue to train on it.
Yeah, and so I have a follow-up question, a private follow-up question. Do you need to answer that the baby was literally homeless the night before program enrollment, even if the head of household was already housed by the time the baby came?
Oh, if the, go ahead, Tucker.
So the eligibility for rapid rehousing programs is all determined by the head of household. So any housing program, what matters in terms of documenting in terms of the homeless status is just the head of household. Oh, you're muted, Jen.
Sorry. Any other questions before we move on to services? Okay. So next up, Maria is going to talk about services.
Yes. So before we head to the services screen, just friendly reminder that rapid rehousing services are eligible expenses under the funding type. So the COC and CHF rapid rehousing services include rental assistance, security deposits, moving assistance, transportation, housing search, and case management. ESG rapid rehousing and housing prevention services include those as well, but they also include rent arrears, utility assistance, credit repair, legal services, and mediation. Agencies can configure these services to have specific COC, CHF, and ESG grants funding available. That amount spent and clients served by those grants can be tracked via service funding. So if we go to the next slide, that's okay. Awesome. So this is the program services screen. So after you do your program enrollment, you can see the program history at the very bottom. You can select that little arrow drop down from your program, and you can see the available services that's under your program. So if you go ahead and go to the next screen, this is what that drop down arrow is going to display. So after you created your enrollment and you've entered in all of the data elements, you'll be able to add these services to your client within that program screen, that program services screen. This is also where you're able to complete a service note for that program. And I think that's it for this screen. If you want to do one more, once you thank you. So this is when you click on to have one of those program services added, this is what your new screen is going to look like. So again, you've seen the start date, you've seen the end date. They're going to be defaulted for the date that you're entering your service. A new feature in Clarity is that you're able to track the amount spent doing this service. So you'll be able to go ahead and enter in the length of time. You also have the ability to enter in your service note. Again, the best practice is not to enter in any names, but you can get detailed within this note, because again, it's within your program and it stays within your agency. So other agencies will not be able to see the details. They'll be able to see that this exists, not necessarily read anything that's underneath or saved under this note. Does anybody have questions on that?
There is a question in the chat, I don't think related to services, but I believe it's related to when you're adding a child or a household member after the head of household is housed. I believe that's what John's asking. He says, does that also apply if a child is reunified in congregate care? So I believe you're saying, would we also add someone to an enrollment if they're in congregate care? Yes. And their status would be whatever the status of the parent or the head of household is.
So Michelle, we're going to talk about rental assistance on the next slide, actually. So that's okay. The next topic.
Right, well, let's move on. Tucker.
Yep. So if your rapid rehousing project, if you have multiple sources, so if you have an ESG or COC grant that people can move from that onto CHF or privately funded rapid rehousing services, you can pay attention to this, and we can set this up for you. It's not a default, and so if you only have ESG program and a COC program and they don't serve the same clients, you don't need to use these particular funding sources, although you can still track amounts. It's not a requirement of in order to do reporting for COC or ESG rapid rehousing to track funding sources, but it is a way that if you have a client who receives, let's say, ESG for security deposit and then CHF for rental assistance, that you can only have to enroll the client in that ESG for the security deposit, and then they can stay enrolled while they're receiving CHF rental assistance, and we can run a APR based on CHF funded services. So it means that you don't have to move people between enrollments and have people exiting to literally people who entering and exiting while they're still in the shelter in a rapid rehousing program. So that's the reason for this. Again, you don't need to do it to keep track of it if you only are dealing with, if all of the services within the program are just funded by the COC or ESG grant, then you don't have to use this if you don't want to. It's really for the purpose of keeping track of rental assistance that might be shifting between ESG or COC and CHF or private funding. So if there, for services like rental assistance where there is funding enabled, you can enter, you would enter the start and end date and the expense date. So that can be, so if it's rental assistance, you would probably be paying for 1 or more months of rental assistance. So the start date would be the month, the start and end date would reflect the month that they're receiving that rental assistance for, and the expense date can be when that expense was incurred for your agency. And you can enter a specific expense amount. The related funding sources can be configured with a set dollar amount so that you can keep track of how much is available, but that's not necessary. You can just keep track of that in your finance department. You don't have to also keep track of it in HMIS. That funding source dropdown, that is where you would select from the funding sources that are set up in your agency. And it's really important that if you're doing it, that you make sure that you're selecting the correct funding source for the service that's being provided, if that's how you're managing your program.
One other thing that's important to know, as Tucker just said, if you're providing, in this example, October month's rent, this is the day the check was cut or the expense was incurred, this is the period of time the rental assistance is for, you cannot create a project exit that is October 15th. You would need to exit the client on or after the last day that rental assistance is provided.
Yes, and the other part is that a client can only have one housing service at a time in Clarity. So you'll only be allowed to enter a rental assistance. So rental assistance is the housing service that's available in rapid rehousing. So they could only receive rental assistance they can only receive one source of rental assistance at a time. And it also means that if you couldn't then enroll them in another permanent housing project while they were receiving the rental assistance, because that would also count as a source of housing subsidy. So it kind of will keep track of, it'll keep track of the housing that's being provided for the client. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it also means that if the client shows up at the shelter won't be able to check them in because they're receiving housing. That's awesome. All right, we do have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to start at the first question. The first is, Michelle, we went back to show about adding rental assistance, but the next is, will the info we enter into Clarity save automatically, or do we have to do this manually? So you do have to do it manually, but if you don't click save, before you're allowed to navigate to a different screen, you will receive a red message indicating that you didn't save it. So there is a green bar that will pop up at the top of your screen. And let me see if I can try to replicate it just to give you an idea. So I'm just going to change something here. And then I'm going to try to toggle over. Oh, it didn't let me change it. So I think it only does it if you're entering something new, not if you're editing something that exists. Okay. So I'll just edit this one to show you the Save tab. Sorry. All right. So I'm going to change. I don't want to change that one. I'm going to change this. And I'm going to click Save Changes. Oops, no. And this green bar will pop up at the top of your screen.
So even just in the short amount of time that we've been, that Maria and I, so Tucker's already used Clarity in a different community, but Maria and I have been working the red please correct changes or please correct errors and the green save bar are things that you just sort of begin to look for before you navigate to another tab. Michelle's asking, how do we get to this screen? So I believe, so Tucker, who did you set up as a rapid rehousing? Was it?
Testy Tester has a rapid rehousing.
Okay. So what you do is you search for the client, click on the client. This is the client level tab. You're going to click on, I guess you could click on history too, sorry. So you'll click on programs, and this shows you all of the active programs and recent services. And then there's also, if there were any recent programs. So you can navigate to the rapid rehousing program using this sort of navigation panel over here. Or you could also use the edit over here as well. So I'm going to navigate using this one. And then here.
Why aren't services showing up?
I know there's no service. We didn't attach a service to this training record. I'm sorry. Why don't we just go ahead, Tucker, and why don't we add one to show everybody? Okay, so I'm in the enrollment here. This is the enrollment. Blah, blah, blah. I enrolled Testy Tester. I entered everything. I clicked save. So you now have Testy Tester enrolled in your rapid rehousing program. So the next thing you want to do, let's see here, sorry. I don't want to add an assessment, sorry. How come I can't add a service? Where's provide service?
We must have used the wrong.
We used the wrong rapid rehousing.
Right, rapid rehousing program.
I'm sorry. Let's see. I'm gonna use. There's no services on these two. I looked last night. I'm gonna go here because this will tell me what program the service is entered in. Okay, so the rental assistance is through the ESC Providence. Okay, so this isn't the rapid rehousing program, but this is going to show you how to enter the service of rental assistance, which is a service you'll be entering into rapid rehousing. So I'm going to navigate to I just want to make sure I have the right one, this one. So I'm going to click on either the left-hand side, or you could click on the program over here in the navigation panel. How come I can't provide a service? One of these options should be to provide service. Let's see.
Are you assigned as case manager for this client? Is that why?
Oh, it's because it's because you're in the wrong agency. It has to be correct.
Thank you,
Yep.
sorry.
Yes.
So that won't happen to all of you. It will only happen to Maria and I.
It might happen to you if you have CES access. So if you have CES access and you're in the coordinated entry, if you're doing coordinated entry, you have to switch back to your own agency in order to record services.
And you know what? That happened to me last night, and I figured it out all on my own. And this morning, it's like I've forgotten all of it. I apologize. So here, this is showing myself, and I am entering information for Crossroads, Rhode Island, which is the program that we're choosing. So now let's start over. So here, let's see, I'm going to, when I'm in the agency, I'm going to search for my client. Here are the active programs. So now I'm going to go to the rapid rehousing program because I believe it will allow me, yes, it will, to provide services. So there is no program service history, as you can see. If there was a program service history, there would be services here and they would be listed here. So we're going to click on provide service. So Michelle, I hope this is what you were hoping us to display here. So we're going to provide a service of rental assistance, and here's where the screen. So you literally just click on this down arrow. I think Tucker calls it the carrot. This is where you would, if I was a rapid rehousing provider and I wanted to record the October rent. So the rent is for the month of October. So I would click on the calendar, choose the first day of the month, click on the calendar, choose the last day. I issued the check today. The expense was, we'll use the example that we had the other day, $400. If this rapid rehousing program, so this is ESG, so for sure the funding source is CHF. So if you have a project type that only has one funding source, you can configure your service notes to not even ask this question. But there are quite a few projects that have two different funding sources. The example was COC and CHF. So if you had a project that had the multiple types, you would want to still keep this funding source option so that you could determine which of the funding sources were applicable to that rental assistance. So then you would put in whatever note. So you could put October rent, last payment, whatever it is, and click submit. So now I'm just going to show you, back from the profile just so that you're clear on navigating over, because I didn't do a good job of it because I was in the wrong user. So when I am in Testy Tester's profile, I can look at the history on the whole HMIS level, and it will show me all of the services and programs. It looks confusing, but look, there's a key down here. So the services are all with this color. So the services that this person's received, and they're a little sporadic because this is a training test client, but it shows a night-by-night bed. This shows healthcare referral by House of Hope, a screening by House of Hope, rental assistance. Oh, that must have been the system. So this shows an enrollment, or a service rather, of rental assistance. Here's the rental assistance service that we just added right here. Rental assistance from a user at Crossroads. And then this shows the start and end date. And then these nice little icons here, you can hover and see what it is. So it's active, 10/5. Here's how much money it was. And then this is the note that we just added. Alex says, does this mean that we only need one rapid rehousing program that is set up with multiple funding sources?
So for rapid rehousing programs, the recommendation I think that we've talked about is that you keep keep programs for the COC and ESG rapid rehousing programs, but then you mark who's receiving, and people should be enrolled at first only in that COC or ESG rapid rehousing program, and then track if they receive any other funding source within that single project enrollment. But we're not going to be able to map the historical data that was coming over from Service Point into those particular funding sources. So everything for the current, for the history is going to have to be still tracked from the existing program enrollments that were in Service Point. We don't have much time left, but I think we want to cover when to exit clients. That's the most important point left in the last 5 minutes. So there are annual assessments for clients who are enrolled in for longer than a year. And so that's where, and also if you're the assigned staff, it will show you, it will warn you when you have annual assessments due. You can use status assessments, those replace interim, for 90-day check-ins with clients in rapid rehousing or homeless prevention, but it doesn't get used in the reporting. You want to make sure you use the annual and the exit information, because that's what gets used for the HUD reporting. And if we want to talk about exits, so clients should be dismissed whichever happens last. So it would be the end of any stabilization services and the end of any rental assistance or other financial services provided. So you should not dismiss a client until after the conclusion of any stabilization that's provided or any financial assistance that's provided. So if your last case management meeting was on the 15th, but the rental assistance lasted through the end of the month, you would dismiss them at the end of the month. If you are the homeless prevention program and you paid back rent, but you talk on the client is continuing to call you every week or two, you would not dismiss them from the program until you've stopped providing those, you've stopped talking to the client and providing them with stabilization assistance. At the conclusion, when the client is done with a program, they've completed their rapid rehousing subsidy. So they should not be exited to a rental with a rapid rehousing subsidy. They should be exited to rental, either it might be to another subsidized situation, or it might be to without a rental without a subsidy. So it's the rapid rehousing rental assistance is concluding with the end of their participation in the program.
Okay. Everyone's seen this slide before. So what we're going to do is just really quick before we wrap up, does anyone have any other questions? Okay, we're going to go ahead and end this training. We'll meet anyone who's coming to the permanent supportive housing training in a few moments in the next Zoom meeting. Thanks for joining us. Take care.